Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we are undertaking a really crucial journey. We're looking at what happens when that profound work of spiritual practice, sadhana, bumps up against the reality of complex trauma.
Yeah, it's a significant collision point.
Absolutely. For many of you navigating CPTSD, chronic anxiety, panic, impulsivity, well, those traditional intensive practices, the ones that promise rapid transformation, they can actually be quite triggering.
That's the core challenge we saw coming up again and again in these sources. When your nervous system is basically running a constant survival program, being told, just sit still and clear your mind for an hour it can feel like locking a panicked animal in a cage.
Right, backfires.
It often leads directly to dysregulation, dissociation, sometimes even re-traumatization, simply because that internal foundation of safety just isn't there yet.
So our mission in this deep dive,
Yeah.
it's quite specific. We want to extract and organize the trauma-informed, the gentle adaptations of these really powerful psychological and spiritual tools. We're moving away from this, frankly, toxic idea of fixing a broken person because you are not broken, and focusing instead on building a stable, resilient, compassionate relationship with yourself.
And what we found looking through everything was this truly profound connection. It's between ancient wisdom and modern science.
Oh, tell us more.
Well, that foundational Eastern principle, that suffering arises from clinging, grasping what we want and resisting, pushing away what we don't want, that is essentially a spiritual description of the trauma response.
Yeah.
Clinging and resisting are, physiologically speaking, the survival skills. Hypervigilance, dissociation. The brain perfects these under threat.
Wow. So it's the same mechanism, just different language.
Pretty much. And our journey today is really about using things like neuroplasticity, the vagus nerve, to gently help retire those skills when they're no longer serving you.
Okay, let's unpack this then. Let's start with the absolute groundwork, building that internal safe house.
Right.
So when your system is in survival mode, safety has to be the absolute non-negotiable starting point for any practice. The sources are really clear on this.
Absolutely fundamental.
If a practice, even when we talk about today, feels overwhelming or triggering, you skip it. It's that simple. Progress here is measured by stability, not by how hard you push. And it won't be a straight line.
Definitely not linear. And we begin with the most basic element, grounding and body-based awareness. We're aiming for really small, almost microscopic practices initially.
Like how small?
Start with just 2 to 3 minutes of gentle body scanning. And this isn't meditation in the, the traditional sense where you have to focus intensely. It's simpler. It's just sensing contact points.
A contact point.
Yeah, feeling where your body makes contact with the world. It's a very gentle invitation for the mind to kind of reconnect with the body.
So sensing those anchors that confirm you're physically present, like consciously feeling your feet flat on the floor or the pressure of your back against the chair?
Exactly. That simple sensory input registers presence. It sends this little micro dose of information to the brain that says, hey, we're connected to solid reality right now.
Okay, that makes sense. Simple physical proof.
And alongside that physical grounding, we need orienting. This is just slowly looking around your environment.
Around.
Yeah, but slowly. Pausing to actually register the colors, the objects, maybe noticing things that signal safety in the room. This process, it should feel deliberate, unhurried.
And that registers you're here and now.
Precisely. It confirms external safety. And importantly, it interrupts that cycle where the mind gets stuck replaying the past or, catastrophizing about the future.
And movement is key too, right? The sources really highlight that trauma energy is often about stuck defensive responses.
That's right. That impulse to flee or fight that maybe couldn't be completed at the time. So gentle practices like some slow yoga stretches or even just walking meditation, they provide a really low-stakes way for that stored energy to discharge safely without overwhelming the system.
Okay, so grounding, orienting, gentle movement.
Yeah.
Then we get to breath work. And you mentioned caution here.
Profound caution, yes. This is where traditional spiritual advice often, frankly, fails the trauma survivor. We have to explicitly avoid intensive pranayama techniques at the beginning. Things like rapid breathing, deep forced breathing. They can instantly flood a sensitized nervous system with adrenaline.
Mimicking panic.
Exactly. It can mimic the panic or hyperventilation response and trigger a full-blown attack. So definitely not the place to start.
Okay, so no intense breathing. What do we do?
Instead of intensity, we focus on regularity and rhythm. The recommendation is coherent breathing.
Coherent breathing.
Yeah, just practicing equal inhale and equal exhale counts. Maybe 4 seconds in, 4 seconds out, or 5 in, 5 out, whatever feels comfortable. It's slow, relatively deep breathing, really aiming to maximize that exhalation phase. We'll get into why that's important a little.
Okay, equal counts, in and out.
And the essential grounding cue here, to keep it from becoming just an intellectual exercise, is physical touch. Keep one hand on your chest and one on your belly.
Why the hands?
It anchors the practice, it ensures the breath stays connected to the physical self, and it can help prevent that feeling of floating away that sometimes happens with dissociation.
Right, keeps you tethered. Now, let me push on this consistency thing for a second. If the goal is building resilience, wouldn't longer sessions be better, like building muscle? The sources push for micro-practices. Why is 5 minutes better than 45 for complex trauma?
That's a really excellent and necessary question. The answer, it lies in establishing reliable competence. A 45-minute session, if you can't actually sustain it because of hypervigilance or distraction, just becomes another source of failure, another reason for self-criticism.
Ah, okay. Setting yourself up to succeed.
Exactly. A 5-minute morning routine, however, that's usually a manageable victory, and that success creates a reliable, positive feedback loop in the brain. It's about building a foundational sense of baseline resilience, giving your nervous system daily proof that says, look, I can regulate myself even if it's just for 5 minutes.
Building evidence of safety bit by bit. And we can boost that evidence with environmental cues, right? Like creating a sanctuary space or using transitional objects.
Spot on. Transitional objects, maybe a smooth stone you carry, a blanket with a specific texture you like, even a set of mala beads. They're tangible, non-threatening items.
How do they work?
Through repeated use during moments of mild regulation or feeling okay, they become associated with safety in your brain. Then, when the nervous system starts to spiral, just holding that stone or pulling that blanket around you acts as a physical cue. It signals to the body, this is a safe space. You can relax the threat response.
It's like a shortcut back to feeling okay.
Yeah.
Now, despite our best efforts, panic attacks, high distress, they're going to happen sometimes. We need immediate physiological circuit breakers. What are the tools for panic interruption?
Okay, the sources point to 2 quick resets that really cleverly exploit the body's own innate responses. First one, using cold water on the wrists or face.
Cold water. Why does that work? Sounds simple.
It immediately activates something called the mammalian dive response.
The dive response. What on earth is that?
Okay, so when cold water hits the skin, especially on the face and wrists where there are lots of nerve endings, it triggers an immediate reflex. It basically tells the body it thinks it's submerging in cold water.
And what does the body do?
This reflex instantly lowers the heart rate, slows down breathing, and constricts peripheral blood vessels. It's a powerful physiological override. It forces the body out of that fight-flight-freeze state by compelling a completely different physiological shift.
Wow. So it's like hitting a biological reset button. Intense, but sounds effective.
It is very effective for a quick reset. The second immediate tool involves bilateral stimulation, like the butterfly hug.
Or you tap your shoulders.
Yeah, alternating tapping your shoulders or tapping your knees. These cross-lateral movements, they force both hemispheres of the brain to engage rhythmically. This helps integrate and organize the overwhelming information that's flooding the system during panic. It gently brings the body back online and interrupts that distress signal.
Okay, tapping helps the brain process. Got it.
And finally, for the system's ultimate escape hatch, dissociation, we need specific dissociation tools. The goal here isn't fighting the numbness, right?
Right. It's about a gentle, sensory-rich return to the present moment, rather than battling the absence. And the classic technique for that.
The universally recommended one is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. You probably know it.
Name 5 things you see.
Exactly. Then 4 you can physically touch, 3 you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. It's structured, it's methodical, it forces the external senses to engage, which directly counteracts the internal withdrawal of dissociation.
Brings you back to the outside world through the senses. And for moments when that's maybe not intense enough.
For really high-level distress, there's the ice diving technique.
Ice diving. Sounds chilly.
It involves holding ice cubes or maybe using frozen orange slices on your tongue. It provides this really intense, undeniable yet non-threatening sensory input.
Why tense?
It's so jarring in a safe way that it successfully interrupts the dissociative state. It roots you back in the immediate, visceral present moment. It proves to your nervous system that your body is real, present, and safe, even if internally things feel chaotic.
Okay, this is where things get really fascinating. We shift from just talking about techniques to understanding how these gentle actions actually become neurobiological rewiring. We're talking structural changes in the brain, not just managing symptoms.
That's the core of it, yes. Real change.
So let's go deeper. If I'm focusing on my feet on the floor during rising panic, how does that physically change what's happening in my brain? How does it stop the attack?
That focus is absolutely critical because it activates what we call top-down processing. See, the feeling of panic, it originates in the amygdala, the brain's quick response smoke detector, which starts firing off alarms.
Okay, the alarm system.
But when you consciously choose to focus on the sensory input of your feet on the floor, you are deliberately engaging the more sophisticated rational part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex. Specifically an area called the dorsal lateral prefrontal cortex.
Okay, so the prefrontal cortex is like the adult in the room. But how does just focusing on my feet override that chemical alarm? Isn't the amygdala much faster?
It is faster, initially, yes. But the prefrontal cortex has inhibitory control. It can dampen other signals. By choosing a complex cognitive task like conscious, sustained sensory tracking of your feet, you actually shunt neural energy away from the amygdala's bottom-up reactive processing.
Ah, you starve the panic pathway of energy.
You're essentially creating a new neural pathway in that moment, a learned action that competes with the panic loop. This new pathway says, I can feel distressed, and I can maintain my chosen focus, which means I can stay present. You're training the observing part of yourself to not automatically get hijacked by the alarm.
That makes so much sense. We're literally building a mental bypass road around the panic switch. And this brings us back to the vagus nerve. We mentioned coherent breathing calms the system. What's the exact mechanism? How does a slow exhale do that?
Okay, the vagus nerve is like the main information superhighway connecting the brain and the body's major organs. It's the primary driver of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state, the opposite of fight or flight.
The calming system.
Precisely. And crucially, the vagus nerve is highly sensitive to something called heart rate variability, or HRV. When you exhale slowly and fully, your heart naturally slows down just a little bit. This increases your HRV.
So the exhale changes the heart rhythm slightly.
Yes. And the vagus nerve detects this slowdown, this increased variability. It interprets it as a sign of safety and sends a powerful signal back up to the brain. Safety detected. Stand down the alarm.
So we're kind of manually intervening in that heart-brain loop. The slow, controlled exhale is a direct physiological way to hit the vagal brake.
Exactly right. It creates a predictable rhythmic signal of safety even when the internal world feels utterly chaotic. And doing this consistently over time fundamentally raises the body's baseline capacity for regulation, which then helps us expand the window of tolerance.
Right. Explain the window of tolerance for listeners who might not have heard that term.
Sure. The window of tolerance is basically the optimal zone of arousal where you can effectively manage your emotions and function well. Trauma drastically shrinks this window.
Meaning you swing wildly.
Yeah, meaning we swing rapidly between hyperarousal, that's fight, flight, panic, anxiety, and hyperarousal, that's freeze, shut down, dissociation. There's very little middle ground.
So how do we widen it?
Practices like pendulation. This involves intentionally moving your attention back and forth between a sensation of mild tension or activation in your body and an area that feels relatively neutral or at ease.
So feeling the tightness, then feeling your feet on the floor, back and forth.
Exactly. It's like emotional weight training. You're briefly moving just to the edge or slightly outside your current window, but then immediately confirming you can return safely to a place of ease. This builds capacity in small, manageable doses. You're stretching the window gently.
And the goal of all this capacity building, this widening of the window, is ultimately to create a moment of non-reaction, to gain pause capacity.
That's the absolute essence of it. It leads directly to the S-T-O-P technique. Stop. Take a breath. Observe what's happening internally and externally. Then proceed mindfully.
Breath, observe, proceed.
This simple sequence inserts a crucial learned delay between a trigger, something that happens, and the habitual, often unhelpful reaction. Practicing this consistently strengthens the prefrontal cortex's inhibitory control, its ability to basically say, hold on a second, to the immediate impulse.
We can tie this directly back to our earlier point about clinging and resisting. This pause is the difference between clinging to the urgency of an impulse and just acting.
Exactly. It breaks the automaticity.
So if I have an impulsive urge, say, to lash out at someone or engage in some kind of self-sabotage, how does inserting that pause work in real time? What does it achieve?
It creates choice, where before there felt like none, Before the pause, the urge feels like law, like an inevitability. But after inserting SOP, maybe taking that breath, maybe even using the ice cube technique for 30 seconds, you've provided the system with competing information.
You've interrupted the signal.
You interrupt the automatic cycle. This allows the prefrontal cortex time to come back online, regain executive function, and help you implement an alternative action, one that hopefully aligns with your deeper values rather than just being dictated by the old trauma reflex. And every single time you successfully manage that pause, you strengthen the neural pathway of choice.
Okay, so building that muscle of pausing. Now, as we get more practiced, the sources say we start developing what's called dual awareness, or the witness state. That sounds quite spiritual, but you link it directly to new neurons growing in the middle prefrontal cortex. What's the neurological basis for being able to observe distress without being totally consumed by it?
Right, it sounds esoteric, but there's solid neuroscience here. The middle prefrontal cortex, or MPFC, is a crucial integration hub in the brain. Dr. Dan Siegel calls its function mindsight. It's where attention regulation, emotional balance, body regulation, even empathy all kind of meet and interconnect.
The brain's integration center.
Pretty much. And consistent mindfulness practices, the kind we're talking about, actually stimulate neurogenesis, the birth of new neurons, specifically in this MPFC area. So dual awareness isn't just a concept, it's the functional result of this strengthened, more integrated MPFC.
So the ability to hold two things at once.
Yes, it's the capacity to hold two truths simultaneously. I am feeling intense panic right now, and I am the awareness observing this experience of panic. This distance, this non-fusion with the feeling, is arguably the ultimate distress tolerance skill. You're not the storm, you're the sky holding the storm.
That's a powerful shift. And then there's another fascinating physical intervention. Polyvagal activation through making sounds. Why does humming or chanting actually work physiologically?
This is a beautiful physiological loop. The vagus nerve, our calming nerve, has a specific branch called the laryngeal nerve. This nerve directly innervates the vocal cords and the muscles in our throat.
Okay, so nerve connection to the voice box.
Yeah. Exactly. So when you hum or chant or use a sustained low tone like the VU breath, just a gentle VU sound on the exhale, you create vibrations in your throat and chest. These vibrations directly stimulate that laryngeal branch, and through it, the entire ventral vagus nerve. Now, the ventral vagal system is the most recently evolved part of our autonomic nervous system. It's the system responsible for social engagement, feeling safe, connected.
The safe and social nerve.
Right. So stimulating it physically through vibration sends a powerful, all clear, safe signal to your entire body and brain. And here's the kicker. You literally cannot sustain the deep, relaxed vibration of a hum or a VU sound and remain in the full, rigid terror of a fight-flight-free state simultaneously. The two states are physiologically incompatible.
Wow, so you can hum your way out of panic, essentially.
In a very real physiological sense, yes. It's elegant. It blends that top-down intention with bottom-up physiological change.
Okay,
And all this work, the grounding, the breathing, the awareness, ultimately helps rehabilitate our internal sensory system, our interoception.
Interoception. Let's define that simply.
Interoception is basically your ability to sense the internal state of your own body. Feeling hunger, fatigue, pain, warmth, cold, and importantly, emotional activation like anxiety or excitement.
And in CPTSD, this system gets scrambled.
Completely. In trauma, those internal signals often get crossed or misinterpreted. A survivor's interoceptive system is frequently calibrated to interpret any internal activation, like a tight chest from anxiety, or an increased heart rate from walking upstairs, as imminent danger.
So normal bodily sensations feel threatening.
Yes. The signal gets misinterpreted as catastrophic. Gentle body scanning, like we discussed earlier, helps retrain the system. It helps you learn to distinguish accurately between activated and dangerous. You are essentially correcting the internal map, learning through repeated experience that a tight chest is anxiety, which is uncomfortable but temporary, not a heart attack, which is catastrophic.
Relearning the language of the body.
Precisely. And the culmination of all these successful moments, the pauses, the safe landings, the accurate interoception is where the deepest healing happens. Memory reconsolidation.
Okay, this sounds huge. Memory reconsolidation.
This is perhaps the most hopeful finding in trauma science. Trauma memories, especially the implicit, body-based ones, are often stored in a very rigid, fixed state. They feel like they're happening now.
Right, they don't feel like memories.
Exactly. But memory isn't actually fixed like a recording. Every time a memory is recalled, every time you feel triggered and that trauma file gets opened in the brain, There's a brief window where it becomes malleable, changeable.
So triggering opens the door to change.
Potentially, yes. If during that window when the memory is active, you manage to stay present, grounded, and regulated using these tools, if you have a different experience this time, you are adding new corrective information to that memory file.
What kind of information?
The information is, this familiar sensation of fear, panic, freeze happened, and I stayed connected to myself, and I used my tools, and I survived without the anticipated catastrophe occurring. The trauma memory gets reopened, updated with this new, safe ending, and then resaved or reconsolidated.
So you're rewriting the ending of the memory.
You are literally rewriting its emotional and physiological impact. This process, repeated consistently over time, gradually rewires trauma's legacy. It shifts it from being a blueprint for constant present danger to being recognized by the brain as a historical incident that was survived. That's profound neuroplasticity in action.
Okay, so we've worked on regulating the body, started rewiring the nervous system. Now we need to tackle the mind, right? Because often the mind is running that constant catastrophic loop of self-criticism, fear, worry.
The mental soundtrack, yes. Which can keep the body activated even when this external environment is safe.
Exactly. So now we enter the realm of cognitive diffusion.
Yeah.
This is a core idea from acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT.
And the goal here is actually quite radical. It's not about trying to change the content of your thoughts. If you have the thought, I am worthless, trying to argue with it or replace it often just gives it more energy, more importance.
Right. Fighting thoughts can feel exhausting and futile.
It often is. The fusion is different. It's about changing your relationship to the thought. It's about learning to see thoughts as just mental events, like words passing through your mind or images or sounds, not as absolute objective truths or paralyzing facts about reality.
So seeing thoughts as thoughts, not as reality.
Precisely. In CPTSD, the big problem is often fusion. The thought, I am worthless, isn't just a thought. It feels like the absolute core truth of who you are. The thought is the self. Diffusion helps create space around that.
How do we practically start creating that necessary distance? What are the techniques?
Well, one of the simplest and most effective methods is the labeling technique. Instead of just getting swept away by I'm a failure, you consciously preface it with a bit of linguistic distance. You say to yourself, I'm having the thought that I'm a failure.
I'm having the thought that.
Yes, that subtle shift does something powerful. It repositions you as the awareness, the observer who is noticing the thought, rather than being the failure itself. It moves the thought from being the center of your reality to being just a passing event in your mind.
Creates a little bit of space.
Yeah.
Okay. What else? I saw mention of using absurdity, like the singing thoughts exercise. That sounds, well, a bit odd.
It does sound odd.
Does it feel dismissive? If I'm having a really terrifying thought, like I'm going to die, and I try singing it to the tune of Happy Birthday, am I not just avoiding the real fear? Making light of something serious?
That's a really important and thoughtful question, and it gets to the core difference between suppression, trying to push the thought away, and diffusion. When you sing the thought, you're not actually suppressing the underlying fear. You're doing something else.
What's that?
You're demonstrating to your own mind that you, the self, are more flexible, more creative, and frankly, bigger than the catastrophic story the thought is telling. You're draining the seriousness and the literalness out of the thought. It's the heavy, grave seriousness of a catastrophic thought that gives it the power to paralyze you. Singing it makes it kind of float away. It loses its grip.
I see. It's like you're poking fun at the thought's self-importance. An act of psychological disobedience, almost.
That's a great way to put it. Psychological disobedience. Exactly. Other tools use visualization, like the thoughts as a weather report analogy.
How does that work?
You just describe your internal state impersonally, like a meteorologist.
Okay, currently observing heavy cloud cover of self-doubt moving through the mind region, or a sudden storm of criticism has arrived, expected to pass by mid-afternoon. This impersonal description externalizes the mental event, making it less you.
Takes the I out of it. And I really appreciate the compassion that seems inherent in the thinking your mind practice. Yes, this one is lovely. When a particularly difficult thought arises, especially one rooted in hypervigilance or fear, you can gently acknowledge its underlying protective intent. You can say, internally, thank you, mind, for trying so hard to protect me.
So you're not agreeing with the thought's content?
No, you're definitely not endorsing the content, the idea that catastrophe is imminent right now, but you are honoring the ancient, often exhausted intent of that part of your mind, which is ultimately just trying to keep you safe based on past experiences. This simple acknowledgement reduces the internal conflict, lowers the sense of threat, and can actually decrease the adrenaline response associated with the thought.
Less internal fighting.
Okay.
So these tools, labeling, singing, weather reports, thanking, they all serve this bigger purpose of building psychological flexibility, right? Which allows us to then use the choice point tool.
That's the ultimate application, yes. When you're feeling distressed or caught up in difficult thoughts, you first just notice, okay, what is my mind telling me right now? Then comes the pivotal question. If I buy into this thought, if I let it dictate my actions, will acting on it move me toward or away from my deeply held values, to the kind of person I want to be?
Connecting it to values.
Yes, this shifts the focus entirely. It moves away from the exhausting, often impossible task of trying to control or eliminate painful thoughts and feelings, and towards the conscious, empowered choice of acting based on what truly matters to you, even in the presence of that pain or difficulty.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense.
You know.
And let's connect this very practical psychological work directly back to that ancient wisdom we started with, the core principle of suffering arising from clinging and resisting.
This connection is so crucial, I think. If we look at the symptoms of CPTSD through this lens, what we see are expressions of highly perfected skills in clinging and resisting. Trauma, by its very nature, trains the brain and nervous system to become experts at clinging. Clinging to the illusion of control, clinging to safety, often through relentless hypervigilance, clinging to certainty, needing to know what's coming next.
Okay, the clinging part
Not
and the resisting.
And simultaneously, it trains us to become experts at resisting. Resisting feeling vulnerable because vulnerability felt dangerous. Resisting difficult emotions. Resisting the present reality, sometimes leading to dissociation or avoidance. These aren't flaws. They are survival skills honed to perfection.
But that constant clinging and resisting is the source of the ongoing internal tension and suffering now.
It absolutely is. The expertise itself becomes the source of current symptoms. The sources really drive this home with a powerful quote, which I think applies perfectly to the survivor's struggle with their own history and feelings. That which is will remain whether you cling to it or not. That which is not cannot remain whether you cling to it or not. That which is not, and that which is, is.
Wow. Say that again.
That which is will remain whether you cling to it or not. That which is not cannot remain whether you cling to it or not. That which is not, and that which is, is.
So applying that, no amount of clinging to the story "I was permanently damaged" will make permanent damage the ultimate truth if healing is possible. And no amount of resisting anxiety will actually make anxiety disappear forever.
Exactly. The anxiety is present in this moment. Resisting it just adds tension. The past did happen. Clinging to wishing it hadn't doesn't change it. Cognitive diffusion practices, therefore, become the practical spiritual act of non-clinging and non-resisting. They allow the mind to have its thoughts, the body to have its feelings, without letting them seize the controls of your life. And this transition we've just described, from fighting thoughts to observing them, leads us directly into what might be the most significant paradigm shift in this entire deep dive. The crucial move away from the fixing trap.
The fixing trap. I think many listeners will immediately recognize that feeling, that sense of needing to fix something broken inside.
It's incredibly common and understandable. But here's the problem. If you approach your own healing journey as a project of fixing yourself, you inadvertently, tragically reinforce the core toxic message of the original trauma, which is usually some version of something is fundamentally and shamefully wrong with you.
Wow. So trying to fix yourself actually makes you feel more broken, like you're failing at fixing.
It often does, precisely because it creates this painful internal split. You end up with, on one hand, the harsh, impatient, critical fixer part of you, the part that demands perfection, rapid recovery, no setbacks. And on the other hand, you have the ashamed, exhausted, resistant, broken part that feels like it can never measure up.
It sounds like an internal war.
It is an internal war, and crucially, it's often a reenactment of the original trauma dynamics, the powerful critical figure versus the shamed, helpless one. This internal conflict dramatically increases shame and actually prevents genuine healing and integration. You can't bully yourself into wholeness.
Okay, so if fixing is the trap, what's the alternative path?
The alternative is the relational approach. This means shifting your stance towards yourself. means endeavoring to become your own secure attachment figure.
Becoming your own safe base.
Exactly. It's about developing an ongoing dynamic interaction with all parts of yourself, one that's characterized by curiosity instead of judgment, by dialogue instead of demands. It's bringing the same patience, compassion, and understanding to your own suffering that you would hopefully offer to a loved one who is struggling.
Can we use relational reframing on a common symptom? How would the relational lens interpret, say, chronic dissociation or intense anxiety compared to the fixing lens?
Okay, great example. The fixing lens looks at dissociation and says, this is a malfunction, it's wrong, I must eliminate it with willpower and techniques. It sees the symptom as the enemy.
Right. Fight it.
The relational lens reframes that same symptom as communication. It asks, with gentle curiosity, okay, my system is going into dissociation. This part of me is screaming, hey, GLP, I am overwhelmed. How can I help you? This overwhelmed part feels safer right now. What resource do you need from me?
Wow, that's a completely different energy. From condemnation to curiosity.
It's the entire foundation of relational healing. That subtle but profound shift changes everything internally.
And this reframing, this turning towards, activates that core paradox we hear about in healing. What we resist persists. What we embrace transforms.
Beautifully put. Because when we resist a painful feeling or a difficult part of ourselves, when we fight it, judge it, try to suppress it, we trigger stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. This reinforces the sense of threat and keeps that part locked in its defensive posture.
Fighting it makes it stronger, in a way.
In a way, yes. But when we manage to turn toward that painful feeling or that struggling part with gentle curiosity, with acceptance, with kindness, when we metaphorically embrace it, we actually activate different neurochemicals, specifically oxytocin, the bonding hormone.
The cuddle hormone.
Exactly. Oxytocin facilitates feelings of safety, connection, and trust. It allows the defensive posture, the anxiety, the dissociation, the anger to soften and relax organically. Change happens naturally when the conditions are safe. You simply cannot heal what you are simultaneously at war with.
Okay, so we need to build this internal relationship. To do that effectively, we need to understand who or what we are relating to inside ourselves, beyond just the trauma identity. This involves, as the sources put it, identity archaeology.
I love that term, identity archaeology, because trauma, especially complex trauma starting early in life, often leads us to believe that we were always anxious or always vigilant or always people-pleasing. The trauma identity can feel totalizing.
Like that's all there is.
Right. So the archaeology work involves gently digging beneath those layers, asking the question, who was I before? Or what qualities existed even in seed form before the trauma took hold or became defining? Were you curious, playful, bold, artistic, sensitive, strong-willed?
Finding those buried parts of the self.
Yes. These qualities are the seeds of your true, authentic self. They haven't been destroyed. They've simply been buried beneath layers of necessary defense mechanisms. Excavating them helps you connect with a self beyond the trauma story.
And we can also work with the defenses themselves, right? By externalizing them using something like the costume meditation.
Exactly. This is a powerful visualization. You consciously visualize those common trauma responses as if they were costumes or pieces of armor.
So hypervigilance might be.
Maybe heavy restrictive armor that makes it hard to move freely. People-pleasing could be a suffocating mask that hides your real face. Numbness might be a heavy gray cloak.
Okay, visualize the defense. Then what?
Then, in the meditation, you consciously, respectfully visualize taking them off one by one. You might even thank each piece for its protective service, acknowledging it helped you survive. And then you gently place it aside, revealing the true, unburdened self beneath. This visualization really helps create psychological separation and choice around using those defenses.
Making them tools again, not identities. And we can also use language to reinforce this separation using the I am, I have distinction.
A simple but profound linguistic shift. Instead of saying, I am anxious, you practice shifting to, I have anxiety visiting right now. Or instead of, I am worthless, it becomes, I'm having feelings of worthlessness. Or, I am exhausted, shifts to, my body has deep fatigue today that needs rest.
Why does that little word change matter so much?
Because I am implies a fixed, permanent identity. I have, or I am experiencing, implies a temporary state or condition that is passing through you. It reinforces the crucial understanding that you are the vast, enduring awareness holding the experience, not the fleeting experience itself. It directly combats that fusion we talked about earlier.
Right, you contain it, it doesn't define you. All of this seems to shift the entire effort. It moves from a desperate pursuit of healing to a more gentle cultivation of it. This culminates beautifully in the sanctuary gardener metaphor.
Yes, the gardener's role is perhaps the perfect summary of this whole relational approach. Think about it. A gardener doesn't stand over their seeds yelling at them to grow faster, right?
No, that would be absurd.
And they don't despise the weeds either, understanding they're just plants in the wrong place.
Yeah.
A good gardener focuses on creating the right conditions for growth.
Oh.
They provide good, fertile soil. Those are the supportive daily practices we've discussed. They offer adequate water that's self-compassion, emotional presence, meeting your needs. They gently remove the weeds that choke out the light things like limiting beliefs, harsh, critical self-talk, unhelpful habits.
So healing isn't a race to be won.
No, it's a gentle, supportive environment to be cultivated. And when the conditions are right, the true self, the innate health within you, naturally begins to emerge, like a plant turning towards the sun.
I love that. It takes the pressure off. And the practical side of creating that supportive environment is the daily healing environment menu.
Yeah.
What are some simple, concrete environmental shifts people can make that signal safety to the body?
We need things that are simple, actionable, and non-negotiable for stabilizing the body first. One key item that came up consistently is consuming protein within 30 minutes of waking.
Protein first thing. Why?
It immediately stabilizes blood sugar levels for the day. Unstable blood sugar creates a physiological stress response in the body that can perfectly mimic or exacerbate anxiety. So, stable blood sugar provides a crucial foundation for emotional regulation. Scrambled eggs, yogurt, a protein shake, whatever works.
Okay, protein priority in the morning. What else?
Another big one is setting a strict tech sunset, ideally at least 1 hour before bed.
Turning off screens.
Yes. The blue light emitted by screens suppresses melatonin production, making sleep difficult. And the constant stream of stimulating, often agitating content keeps the nervous system stuck in sympathetic overdrive, that on-alert state. A tech-free hour allows the nervous system to downshift naturally. These small, consistent environmental shifts send powerful signals of safety and predictability to the body, allowing that gentle emergence of the true self to happen more easily.
Okay, now let's zoom out even further, to the widest possible context. This whole concept of trauma-informed growth, this relational approach, it can actually be mapped onto frameworks like spiral dynamics, which illustrates how human value systems and consciousness tend to evolve through stages.
That's right. The sources use this framework quite effectively to show how trauma can sometimes create developmental arrests. It can fix parts of the self or lock certain coping strategies at specific earlier stages of development, even if intellectually we've moved far beyond them.
Right, so trauma keeps parts of us stuck in the past, developmentally speaking.
In essence, yes. Trauma often forces us to develop survival strategies that were perfectly suited to navigating the challenges of an earlier developmental stage. And those strategies can persist long after the original threat is gone, causing problems in our current lives. This helps explain why we see such profound, persistent patterns of clinging and resisting tied to specific unmet developmental needs.
Okay, let's walk through some examples. Starting with the earliest relevant stage, purple consciousness, which is often described as tribal or magical thinking.
Right. The core focus at Purple is safety through belonging, connection to the immediate group or family, and often appeasing powerful forces, real or imagined. Trauma, especially early attachment trauma, can lock a significant child part here.
What does the clinging and resisting look like at purple?
The clinging is often intense, clinging to family approval or later group identity, even if it's harmful. There's this deep belief, if I'm just very, very good, mommy won't leave me, or if I follow all the rules of the group perfectly, I will finally be safe and belong. The resistance at this level is usually against any form of individual expression, independent thought, or autonomy that might threaten the connection to the perceived source of safety. In recovery, this can manifest as extreme fear of being seen, standing out, or being left alone.
That makes sense. Fear of abandonment driving conformity. Okay, moving up the spiral to red consciousness. This is often described as the stage of raw power, impulsivity, egocentricity.
Yes, red is all about self-assertion, survival through strength, dominance, and getting one's needs met immediately. The red protector part is incredibly common in CPTSD survivors. This is the part that learned the world is fundamentally dangerous, and the only way to survive is through force or control.
So the clinging and resisting here.
The primary resistance at red is against vulnerability in any form. Showing weakness means death or trust no one. Compassion might be seen as foolishness. The clinging is to immediate control. power, maybe righteous rage, dominance, and impulsive action. In recovery, this red protector part often fiercely resists the surrender, vulnerability, and emotional processing needed for deeper healing, because it equates those things with annihilation. Rest feels like dangerous laziness.
The tough exterior protecting a vulnerable core.
Oh.
Okay, then we often see people get stuck or operate from orange consciousness in their healing journey. Orange is about achievement, rationality, strategy.
Exactly. Orange consciousness is focused on optimization, measurable success, scientific thinking, and strategic planning. When applied to healing, this can create a coping mechanism that treats recovery like a business project or a game to be won.
How does that show up as clinging and resisting?
The clinging here is tightly bound to measurable outcomes, progress charts, finding the right technique. There's often intense frustration. I'm failing at recovery because I haven't hit these specific milestones yet, or I need a better strategy. The resistance is often against things that are unmeasurable, subjective, or seemingly unproductive, like deep emotional processing, rest, mystery, or simply being with difficult feelings without trying to fix them immediately. If it can't be put on a spreadsheet, the orange mindset might dismiss it.
Right, trying to logic your way out of trauma. And I see the paradox emerging here. To reach genuine integrated healing, which often requires accessing yellow integral consciousness, the ability to see the value in all the stages and use the appropriate tools for each level we first have to stop fighting and actually honor the wisdom and protective function of those earlier stages within us.
You've nailed it. That brings us squarely to the sacred paradox of evolution highlighted in the sources. By fully honoring where we are, even if parts feel stuck in lower stages like purple or red, we naturally evolve. By resisting where we are, by shaming those parts, we stay stuck.
So acceptance is the key to transformation.
Yes, if you're grappling with intense red rage, you have to honor the protective intelligence and the life force within that rage before you can integrate it healthily. Healing isn't about transcending our messy, trauma-informed humanity. It's about fully embodying all of it, integrating all its stages and lessons with compassion.
And the remarkable outcome of doing this deep integrative work isn't just getting back to normal. It can actually lead to post-traumatic growth, PTG. The research here is really quite stunning, isn't it?
It really is. This isn't just anecdotal hopefulness anymore. The work by researchers like Tedeschi and Calhoun consistently shows that a significant percentage of trauma survivors, estimates range from 40% to even 70% or higher, in some studies report experiencing positive psychological growth as a result of grappling with their trauma.
Growth beyond simply recovering or returning to their previous baseline.
Exactly. It's about evolving past the pre-trauma baseline in meaningful ways. PTG is essentially a profound skill update, facilitated by the neuroplasticity we discussed earlier. The brain literally changes in response to the healing process.
And the sources detail the 5 domains of PTG. What are they?
Okay, the 5 commonly recognized domains are: first, a significantly greater appreciation of life, often with shifted priorities towards savoring the present moment. Second, deeper, more authentic, relating to others, frequently involving increased empathy and compassion born from having navigated suffering. Third, an enhanced sense of personal strength, a recognition of resilience and capabilities they didn't know they possessed. Fourth, seeing new possibilities for their lives, perhaps new paths, interests, or perspectives they wouldn't have considered before. And finally, often, a profound spiritual development, maybe finding deeper meaning, purpose, or connection.
That's incredibly hopeful. It means we can actively reframe our past struggles, not as just damage, but as a kind of specialized, albeit painful training, using PTG as skill update with tools like the survival skills resume and the retirement planning method.
I love those practical reframes. The survival skills resume is about acknowledging without judgment the incredible skills you develop to survive. For example, hypervigilance wasn't a flaw. It was a world-class, necessary skill in scanning for threats. You list it on your resume with honor.
Okay, acknowledge the skill, then what?
Then, using the retirement planning method, you consciously choose to evolve that skill now that the environment has changed. You retire the exhausting, reactive, automatic version of hypervigilance that keeps you constantly panicked. And you promote its underlying wisdom into something new, like mindful awareness.
So transforming the raw skill.
Exactly. Mindful awareness uses the same capacity to notice subtle shifts in the environment or in your body, but it does so with non-judgmental presence, curiosity, and choice, rather than immediate catastrophic panic. You keep the sensitivity, but lose the reactivity. You're consciously updating your internal software.
That reframing really does turn the burden into potential wisdom. It's incredibly empowering.
It is. And crucially, this reframing isn't just wishful thinking. It's physically supported by the brain science we touched on earlier. Successfully navigating distress, choosing mindful responses, engaging in these practices, it demonstrably increases neurogenesis, the birth of new brain cells, especially in the hippocampus and prefrontal cortex, and boosts levels of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which is like high-grade fertilizer for brain growth and connection.
So the brain physically upgrades itself through this process.
Yes. The very systems that were hijacked or underdeveloped by trauma are now being actively strengthened and rewired. This enables the prefrontal cortex, the mindful observer, to become the default response system more often. It makes post-traumatic growth not just a possibility, but a neurobiological probability if the relational conditions and practices are consistent.
We started this deep dive with tiny 5-minute grounding practices, and now here we are, standing at the threshold of this vast existential context of growth and evolution. We need to bring it all together now, pipe every piece of this journey back to something fundamental, true, sustainable life satisfaction.
And the first crucial step in that connection is realizing something quite radical. Satisfaction isn't primarily something external that we get or achieve. It's much closer than that. It's something that awareness itself, IS.
Awareness is satisfaction. Explain that.
Well, think about our typical cultural programming, especially in the West. It often functions like a highly efficient machine for producing dissatisfaction. It trains us relentlessly into the habits of clinging and resisting.
How so?
Through constant comparison with others, through an obsessive future orientation that discounts the present moment, through the relentless pressure of productivity culture, where our worth feels tied to what we achieve or produce. All of this keeps us chasing something outside ourselves, reinforcing the feeling of not enough.
So this cultural programming actively separates us from accessing an innate sense of okayness. It separates us from the seat of self.
Precisely. That core awareness, the observer self, that we cultivate through practices like mindfulness and dual awareness is, in its fundamental nature, inherently satisfied. Why? Because it's already complete. Pure awareness needs nothing outside itself to be whole. It just is.
So suffering only arises when?
Suffering arises primarily when the mind gets identified with or fused with the content of its thoughts and feelings, and then engages in the old patterns. Clinging, I absolutely must have this feeling outcome thing to be okay, or resisting, I absolutely must avoid this feeling thought situation to be okay. That struggle is the dissatisfaction.
Therefore, the entire healing journey, this whole deep dive we've just taken from grounding to diffusion to relational repair to PTG, it all culminates in this final recognition.
Yes. The final recognition is realizing that you are the inherently satisfied, peaceful awareness you have been seeking all along. You were never fundamentally broken. You were only temporarily exiled from the direct knowledge of your own completeness by being perfectly, necessarily trained in the survival skills of clinging and resisting.
When you realize that satisfaction isn't something to chase, but something to return to, something that's your core nature, what happens?
The exhausting, lifelong struggle to fix yourself, to become good enough, to chase fleeting external metrics of success or happiness, it begins to naturally drop away. It loses its urgency. You shift from desperately struggling to get well to practicing being the well-being that you inherently already are underneath the layers of conditioning and trauma.
And that perspective leads us to the ultimate purpose and maybe the final provocative thought for you, the listener, to take away from this deep dive.
The point of all of this profound, often incredibly difficult work isn't just to feel better, although that's vital. The point is the becoming. Your trauma, unwanted as it was, forced you onto a kind of hero's journey. And your healing journey is the alchemical process of transforming that original poison into potent medicine and wisdom, not just for your own liberation, but ultimately for the benefit of the collective as well.
That's beautiful. Transforming poison into medicine.
And please remember the paradox of the spiral we discussed. You are not failing if parts of you are still growing or healing at what feels like an early stage, like red or blue or purple. You are perfectly growing in exactly the way your unique system needs to grow right now to transform its specific history of trauma into embodied wisdom. Every single stage, every micro-practice, every moment you choose self-compassion over self-criticism, it's a sacred act. It's the act of returning home to the wholeness you've always been.
Thank you so much for joining us for the deep dive.